A variable is a name associated with a value or a name assigned to a value. If I want to print out 10, I can easily say print 10. Of course, this is going to display 10 in the terminal. But instead of using the raw value or the raw number, I can assign this value to a name. I can say number is equal to 10. Now I can go ahead and display 10. I can have print number. And of course, this is going to display 10. So what this means is that we assigned this value 10 to this variable or to this name. So whenever I want to refer to the value, I can always use the name. And this is what we call variable declaration. In some other programming languages, you are required to specify the type of data that a variable is going to hold. But in Python, you are not required to do so. In other programming languages, we do things like int, variable name, then you perform an assignment. This is a way of telling the program that this variable is going to store an integer or a number. But in Python, all you have to do is just provide a name, provide an equality symbol, then provide a value. I can say 20. Now, if I run this program, I'm going to display 20 on the terminal. And the reason for this is because 20 is the latest value associated with this name. So this other one is obsolete because we now have a newer declaration. In essence, when we declare variables, we are storing values in a name for later use. I can use variables to store information about a person. I can have something like name is equal to, I can have John. We'll have age is equal to 21. I can have gender is equal to male. And finally, I can have something like bio is equal to a very nice person. Now, whenever I want to make use of the value, I can always make use of the variable names or the names associated with the value. I can have something like print name. This is going to display the name. If I want to display the gender, I can have print gender. And this will display the gender. For the bio, I can have print bio. And this will display the bio. Now I can go ahead and say bio is equal to maybe not a good person. At this point, bio is now assigned to a new value. So if I want to display the value associated with the bio, I can have print bio. And this is going to fetch the latest value associated with the name. So this is basically how we declare variables in Python. Now, let's look at some of the rules to be observed when naming variables. And the first one is that variable names can contain letters, numbers, and underline. So when we have something like num1 is equal to 10, this is a valid name. We'll have letters and a number, so this is a valid name. I can as well decide to include an underscore. This is also a valid variable name. Now let's look at the second one. Variables cannot start with a number. Yes, you can have numbers as part of a variable name, but you cannot start a variable name with a number. So you cannot have 1 like this. So this is an invalid variable name. If I try to run this program, you can see we have a traceback. And this has to do with the fact that we didn't follow the naming convention. And the naming convention says that we cannot start a valid variable name with a number. If I remove this 1 at the beginning, the underline disappears. And if I try to run the program again, the error messages disappear. You cannot start a variable name with a number. Also, you cannot include spaces as part of variable names. I cannot have num, then put a space in between them. This is an invalid name. Rather, if you want to denote a space, you can use an underscore. You cannot use space or spaces as part of variable names. So this is the right way to go about it. You cannot use reserved words or keywords for variable names. There are words or phrases that have special meaning in Python. These are called reserved words or keywords. You cannot use them as your variable names. You cannot use words like print. This is a reserved word. You cannot use continue. This is a reserved word. You cannot use pass. These are reserved words. You don't use reserved words as your variable names. Now, finally, when naming your variables, you have to ensure that the names are descriptive. If you want to store the age of a person, you can simply have age. If somebody looks at the variable name, the person can be able to tell what type of information that is stored with the name. So if I have something like this is a descriptive name. If somebody sees age, the person knows that you're talking about the age of a person. If you see something like description, at least to give you a clue that this is a description of something, of a product, or of a person. If you use something like this, it can also denote description. But when you use the or one-letter names, it is not descriptive. It is not meaningful. Try as much as possible to use descriptive names. For instance, you can decide to use DOB to represent or to denote date of birth. If somebody sees DOB, at least the person will have a clue that probably this variable is used to store the date of birth of a person or date of birth of something. So try as much as possible to use meaningful and descriptive names. In our next lesson, we're going to learn about data types.